So we're starting out with another round 1 game of the Warchief Club 12's main event league. So we've got Crackedy here up against FrancisBean. And Francis going for his Abbasid. Crackedy going for English. So Crackedy's even squeezing out a quick mill. Rather than going just 2-2-2 and having them build double up on the mining camp production, he's actually had one of them build the house, one of them build the mill. So I think this actually might be slightly more efficient than the build guide that Beastie recommended. Like, it's actually slightly more advanced because you're not having the efficiency loss by workers doubling up on building. I mentioned it a couple of times, but there is actually diminishing returns to having more than one build a building. Like, say these take 15 seconds, you put 2 villages, it takes 9. If you put 3, it'll take 6. So you see what's going on there? You're basically reducing the amount of time you're reducing with each subsequent villager. So Crackedy's not done that. He's gone for probably the most optimal start, but it does mean he's not going to get wheelbarrow until the resources actually trickle through. But it seems like they're going to trickle through slightly quicker anyway, so he'll be able to go for that wheelbarrow now. So FrancisBean hasn't actually got anything connected yet, so it's not going to take much. Like, it'll only take a house here and a military production facility here, and he'll connect up his buildings anyway to contribute towards his golden age bonus, which opposite exclusive for each building connected in the influence pattern to the House of Wisdom. You gain bonus, well, not for each, but for 10 then 30 then 60 you gain some pretty heavy eco benefits. So gather rate, then gather rate and research time, then gather rate and research and production speeds. So ideally in the late game, the Abbasid base looks like a big snake of houses, production and everything, all sort of packed together in order to... Oh yeah, here we go. So these guys actually are just close enough to benefit. I'll take that back. So yeah, he'll be able to go for a production facility or some more houses back here. And FrancisBean will be able to connect up everything. He's only just now started his wood gathering, which I think is pretty normal. Might only be slightly delayed. Maybe one extra villager on the goal, but it's nothing huge. But Crackedy's build, like I said, it seems to be super efficient English player here. So far, he hasn't skipped a beat, but he's actually delayed getting any extra workers on the wood yet. He's not actually going to go for the farms just yet, even though he's got wheelbarrow immediately. So by now, most English players, I think it'd probably just be going on the farms, but this way, Crackedy's not having to worry about even that. He's got a good number of sheep. Did opt to go for 2 scouts, and so did FrancisBean. So Abbasid, because they go berries, and because English have such an easy farm transition, these civs are among the least reliant on a good sheep count and having to go for a second scout, but it is handy anyway for the vision that it does by both players. And then it means that you can always go for a bit of gold or stone harass, which is really quite nice on this matchup, considering Abbasid in particular like to go for a second town centre in Age 2. English can, but at the same time, if you mount early aggression and go to Age 3, you'll get a second town centre in the process if you go for the King's Palace, which is pretty normal. And then on top of that, if you pressure early with towers and such, you give yourself access to that attack speed buff, which is a whopping 25% on all your units, which is really handy to have. So Crackedy's even going to go for a fairly aggressive tower here. So he's brought both his scouts, got both his vills, and he's ready to try and punish FrancisBean for a fairly standard fast second town center opening, which is, I guess, pretty much more or less the advised way to play Abbasid. But in saying that, the second stone is on the front side, so it's going to be quite easy to actually follow up this first tower with a second. Whereas if you had a second one over here in this back corner, might be a little bit easier. Or if it was sort of here, but within a good wall range, so you could just wall off like there and there. Again, just be a little bit easier to make it, make switching from this first stone to a second without immediately being greeted by another tower. A little bit easier. So Crackedy's trying to focus down Francis' villages. Well, Francis is just doing what he can to gather through it. But Crackedy's actually going to go for a second tower and get arrow slits in the first, so he's got a good timing of stone gathering behind this, and it does set him up to go for a second and third, well, a second town center without necessarily having to go for the age 3, or he can go age 3 and go for the second town center and go triple TC in response to the Abbasid playing double TC. Before the Abbasid's really able to do a huge kickback as such. Although it does sort of cede in map control from here, and then it means these towers are eventually going to get taken down by a fairly quick ram. Because from here Abbasid can really just get... well, they're up against English, so probably... well, it's still open archers, but then also get stables. But the beauty of opening with anything infantry, whether it's archers or whether it's spearmen, you get access to rams without even having to go for siege engineering, unlike every other civ. So I think that might be Francis' best choice here, to go for a mix of archery ranges and stables, and try and deny the English the chance to simultaneously get arrow-slitted towers on the map and go for a second town center and a third town center through the castle age. You know, you've sort of got to either make sure you can go toe-to-toe on the greed, or if your opponent is going to step it up a notch in terms of greed, that you're able to punish, which we've seen Crackedy already do to Francis as such, but now Francis has got to respond with the same. So he's actually going to open double range, so this will mean he'll be able to mass up enough archers that he can get that nice early battering ram as quickly as possible. But then it does mean that if the English player has been massing his own longbowmen, you're sort of building a unit that's going to get soft countered. And saying that, Crackedy's already invested in that second town center already. That's so quick and it's so safe and hard to actually scout, because unless you sort of wrap a scout around here, you're not going to know. So I think that's part of the idea of this as well, is that he's keeping Francis guessing with just how greedy he's playing. He hasn't even started that farm transition yet, and if he had have, he probably wouldn't have the wood to squeeze this in just yet. You know, even though English farms are super efficient compared to every other civ, they're still not free at the end of the day. So it does mean that if you're able to cut them, there is potential to squeeze stuff like this in. Because like by now, if you're on, you'd probably be going to the second mill anyway. And so say you've got 12 to 15 farms plus the 2 mills. You know, you've got a couple of hundred wood there. So it's not that hard to cut all that. Then gather, say, another 100 wood and the stone you need for the TC, and then throw that up instead. Sort of keep your opponent guessing when you're in a position like this. So now Francis sort of doesn't know just how greedy Crackedy is playing. Sort of just relying on the fact that he might be able to get all the stables and ranges out he needs to just break this hold for now, while just trying to commit towards the age 3 timing and that he was sort of hoping for. He's probably not going to get the chance to squeeze in a third town center at this rate, but if he can eventually break this, he might be able to later on. Because the English player, when they do go age 3, you can rest assured that they will go for the oh look, probably going to get arrow slits here once he gets the stone. Because yeah, you can be rest assured the English player from this position of 2 TC in H2 is going to go for the King's Palace anyway, just to drive home that crazy good eco of theirs. And now Crackedy's committing to farms really quite late, but at this stage he can actually go horticulture as soon as he actually really hits that 15 villages on farms count, and really make efficient use of that as well. He's actually skipped getting survival techniques, which is interesting because he's actually got nearly 10 villages there on that hunt. So considering it's a little bit cheaper than the other eco techs, and it does train a little bit faster too, it is a nice tech to fit in. But this has been really nice for Crackedy. He's sniped 3 or 4 villages without Francis knowing. Well, without Francis actually microing back vills. So this is a bit lazy here from Francis. That he's just letting those vills fall for free, in the sense. Because he basically, if he had evacuated them, he could have taken this out pretty much for free. Which would have been great for him. Ooh, but as it is, Crackedy could probably be microing that on the vills. But it fulfilled its purpose, I think. It got 3 or 4 vills. And at this stage, he is even with the Abbasid player on eco. So 44 vills for Crackedy to 47 for Francis. So with his harass, pretty much buying him a little bit of breathing space to pay off the fact that he's gone for these towers. I think this harass has ultimately been worth it, because the ram's pretty much going to gain a bit of value out of that, but you still have to invest in the ram, which is a cost of 2 towers with arrow slits, or just slightly less than. So I think it's 350 versus 300. But King's Palace going down now, triple barracks, so we'll probably see a big push with man-at-arms, a couple of longbowmen there to defend, but Crackedy probably squeezing some more of those once he actually dumps a bit of food into man-at-arms production and gets some more farms here, or gets these guys back to hunting. But he's bought himself a lot of time against the Abbasid player, unsettled him a little bit. Now Francis has got a look at getting some value around the map. He's going to pick up the scout there, which is a nice kill, because it stops that jungler vision. And this is also a nice little catch for Francis. So the longbowman not reinforced by anything. While this is going on though, the King's Palace is finished up. So that's probably the gambit there, that even if they die, this goes up. And now the English player is up a town centre over the Abbasid player, and now he has access to heavier tech than the Abbasid. So he's getting the second upgrade for the man-at-arms, having got the first just while the age up was going on. And he's also getting armor clad, so real important to try and synchronize your military upgrade techs if you're this destined on all-inning with the units as well. Make sure you get the first tier of the man-at-arms upgrade for English on the way as you go into castle, if you intend to get the second one as soon as you're in castle. So triple barracks, man-at-arms production is going to start as soon as Crackedy can really get the food eco to afford it. So he's just now expanding onto a third mill. But he's going to have to deal with Francis pressuring him, although I think Francis doesn't realise he can actually look at pressuring extremely deep before the man-at-arms production really ramps up, because it's only once he actually gives Crackedy the time to stabilise and get the 450 food per minute eco he actually needs. No, it's not. It's much higher than that. It's like fucking, yeah, 1200 eco food per minute that he actually fucking needs to produce all this and mount the force to defend and then push. So I think Francis has made a bit of a mistake here by sort of backing out the moment the Spring Hill towers come up. He really probably should have looked at sacking this wood line, because if he had have got, you know, say 6 to 8 vills there, could have really hurt any longbow production following up to this going up. Could really hurt any transition from these barracks, or even squeezing in the houses behind all this. It's a nice comp though, adding in camel archers, but there's no camels for the aura of them to really work. So until you can really mass them up in enough numbers, there's sort of nothing that really counters the man-at-arms as such in this composition. So they'll be able to trade really well with the horsemen, as FrancisBean's finding out. He's losing a lot of his front line, even though Crackedy's really only pushing with a handful of man-at-arms here. So Francis has a nice comp and a nice unit count lead over Crackedy, but because he didn't sort of punish then, I think he's actually a bit more behind than he realises. Crackedy is ahead in terms of score based off his eco lead at the moment. And he does have that armor upgrade already for his... He's already got Iron Undermesh for his melee. While FrancisBean has gone for Siege Engineering, but being Abbasid, he hasn't really needed it to this point. And it's only once he gets Castle Age, which he's got in the queue, with his Culture Wing, that he's going to be able to produce Springles or Mangonels. I mean, the Mangonels can be great against all these small foot units, so cavalry units. Mangonels aren't so great against because their hitboxes are bigger, so they don't stack up quite as nicely. But all these small English units, particularly these heavy units that he doesn't really want to get crossbows for, even though he can get crossbows, I think he just much prefers the mobility of the Camel Archers, like most people in this meta. But the Camel Archers, they don't really actually kill the Man-at-Arms mass like they would any light units, or like they would any cavalry. So they got bonus damage versus spears, and they've got a buff that makes cavalry weaker against them, but against the Man-at-Arms, such a versatile melee unit, such a versatile foot unit in this game, which is surprising for melee infantry. They're usually at the bottom of the pecking order. Usually melee and ranged cav followed by ranged units dominate RTS games like AoE, but in AoE 4, Man-at-Arms, just because the armor systems seem to be able to take such great fights against all these light range units, even though these guys are technically later in the tech tree, they're just not able to take this fight. So a handful of Man-at-Arms going down for quite a few camels there. While this is going on, Crackedy can push, add towers, which adds an attack speed buff to both his melee and range units. 25% attack speed, so the Abbasid player now needs something more than just rams, because there's a keep on the way as well. So Francis, going to look at getting on this hunt up here. But he needs to be able to transition to siege, and on top of that, get some MMs out to try and capture all these relics before Crackedy's really able to wall everything in. And it's smart of him to wall in this topside one. Makes it really difficult to try and get that relic. So Crackedy mounting it. What I think is probably going to be a successful push here against Francis, because this ram, it's going to take a while to get on that outpost. In the meanwhile, the front line there for Francis has fallen, so he really needs to get some more lancers out in the field. Well, the ram does get taken out by all the Man-at-Arms, because they don't have to try and block and screen for these longbowmen who are suddenly going to be able to chip away at structures, and maybe even look at adding a ram themselves, because at this stage the Abbasid player doesn't have anything to really shield from the rams. It's not as though there's masses of sprinkled towers or a keep in the way to sort of deny single ram usage and force either a mass or some later game siege. But these lancers will be able to really help screen for the archers here of FrancisBean, but Crackedy now able to get control of his army again. He's going to pick off that last lancer and be able to send some volleys in on the archers of Francis. He now finds himself in a really ugly spot at the moment, so 149 pop to 100, so we've got 85-15 for eco to military, 100 to 48 there for Crackedy. So Crackedy both has a slight eco lead behind this and a little bit more in the bank, and Francis is now really having his army whittled down. Longbowmen, a real threat against archers who just don't have the range that they do as well. So while they're trying to focus down frontline units, the longbows just pick them off. Now Francis, ooh, a lot of villages there under threat. He's going to have to move 15 villas or so. And another 5 or 10 over here. He needs to immediately try towering up and have a little bit garrison, but obviously he wants to try and gather through this. But in the meanwhile, he can afford to actually drop his food gathering to have garrison vills, and in the meanwhile throw up towers with other vills and gather some wood through this. He needs to try and get some gold somewhere out in the map, but it's going to be very difficult. Oh, actually, that's Francis' keep. He needs to cancel that so he can throw one up at home, or you know, if he had a market, he could put that stone into... Ideally, he would have just had more gold in the bank at that point, because that keep, I don't think it was ever going to go up. And these fills are going to take forever to get on that gold mine. It's only 3. He's got this gold mine over here as well that he needed to get on earlier. So this is rough. Like, I mean, he knew about this gold because he was on that hunt earlier. And now he's run out of gold. Crackedy's picking off his vills, running in, but he's hit garrison cap now, so he's taken too many vills in. And Francis' vills are all going to get killed by the longbowman. GG, well played, guys. So Francis goes through the losers bracket. Crackedy progresses through to round 2.